Welcome back to the channel, everybody. We're out in the large greenhouse today, and I have a ton of questions all the time on solar pumps and DC powered pumps and setting up solar panels and systems to run water as opposed to just run electricity to like a light source or a fan or something of that nature. And a few main ideas you want to keep in mind when purchasing a pump or setting up some type of system such as our Jean Pain compost heating or our aquaponics systems. They are two different spectrums. We've got a large system in this greenhouse with a large overflow tank, and in the small greenhouse we have a tiny little solar pump that is probably about double the size of this little pump right here. And see, this is just a little solar pond pump, and this was for basically aerating a little pond. And we turned this around and have used it many ways, and I will simply just throw this down and plug it in just to move water, and I'll set our compost tea right next to where I want watered, set this up, and 5 minutes later I will move my bucket. We set up a very minimalistic system in our small greenhouse, our little 6x12, and we were able to push water for the last 4 years using it in winter and in summer. These pumps are proving to be very versatile. However, these ones are very tiny, and they do not flow a whole lot of water, maybe a quarter or a half of a gallon per minute on a fully sunny day, which is not a whole lot. But for our minimalistic system, we were able to passively heat our greenhouse and pull some heat off of our compost. And after our pump did the work of lifting our water, the gravity would feed our water through the system and back into our overflow tank. Now that brings me to a main point of picking out a pump. You want to be able to have enough overhead lift. So these little tiny pumps do not have a whole lot. They might be able to lift water 4 feet straight up. So we were able to use gravity to feed our water back into our system. But with our large Jean Pain composting, we are going to be forcefully pushing water. We are going to build up some certain amount of PSI, and we should reach about a gallon and a half per minute. So those numbers are pretty important. You want to be able to flow at least a gallon per minute if you're using your system for compost heating. So we will be traveling water through our copper tubes wrapped around that post, and we're going to forcefully be pushing it, and it's going to forcefully come out the other end. We're not just raising water and letting it fall through the system with gravity. We're going to be forcefully pushing water. And Jean Pain himself was able to heat up groundwater all the way up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit or 60 Celsius at the rate of a gallon or more per minute. Not much more than that, because you would be losing draw on the heat side. So you would be overflowing the amount of heat you're able to transfer. So you really don't want to overdo it with the water flow. So we had originally purchased this about a year ago, pretty cheap. And this is a big monster version of a DC water pump. So this flows about 20 gallons a minute or more, and we don't need all of that. And it will lift water 20 to 25 feet or about 6 meters before it maxes out and reaches its capacity to push the water. So the reason I brought this massive pump out to show everybody is because you don't want to overdo it, and you do want to kind of get a good feel for what you're going to be pushing. I got a bunch of tangled wires here, but we've got these two pumps, and this pump has been running for a couple years now, and it's about 20 years old. This came out of my live well from my boat, and it has ran flawlessly for year after year. And I've been using this for compost heating for about a year and a half and just simple water moving tasks. And I'm actually surprised at the longevity on our DC system. We're going to end up using a newer version of this pump when that one dies on us, if it ever does. So I've been kind of keeping this one on the back burner because why use it if I don't have to? Now, another main point to consider is if you're moving fluids other than water, you want to make sure you're not using anything corrosive to your system or use a pump that's capable. I don't know when or why you would use any type of corrosive material other than maybe pesticides and stuff, but we don't use any of that stuff on our homestead. The only thing we move with this is water. Now, if you're setting up any type of system like this where you're going to be moving water through a bunch of tubing and you're going to need a pump and possibly an overflow tank, or you can run an inline pump where you have a sealed system. And jumping back to the last topic, you could possibly use coolant for a car in a system like this, so you don't ever have freeze ups. But I would hate to have a line leak and then you have coolant or ethylene glycol in your soil, poisoning your soil. So you're picking out a pump and you're looking for the head. You want to figure out what it's going to push and how high it's going to push. So the head on a pump is basically the force it's going to take, or the PSI it's going to take to push that fluid up to the breach point, basically to the ending point of where it's going to either recycle or to the vat that it's storing. So as long as you have a high enough head on your pump to reach over your compost pile, our water is going to be forced from our pump overflow tank out and up our post, and then back down our post and back into the greenhouse, thus getting heated by our compost, and it's going to transfer all of that heat to the PEX tubing we're going to lay in the greenhouse. I really wanted to touch on that subject because we used gravity to feed our compost heating system in our little greenhouse, and we are going to be pushing the water forcefully in this system. So there is a big difference to that little passive system we had built to this active compost heating system. And in a true Jean Pain sense, we are trying to be as eco-conscious about building this pile as we can. That copper tubing is going to be used for years on end for this kind of system here, and all of our solar systems seem to run for quite some time, so I don't feel bad investing into little solar panels and solar systems when they constantly run for us and prove to be productive and have some good longevity on them. So really the only byproduct we're going to have from this compost heating system being ran by solar power is our compost, or some methane, which we are going to also try and harvest the methane from this pile. I'm going to build a contraption to do that, and I will make a video on that specifically. So I'm kind of relating all of this water flowing to compost heating or geothermal heating or cooling, because I'm sealing up a system and I'm trying to passively heat it with either the sun, compost, or the ground, all natural sources of heat and all eco-friendly, all free to use. And it takes a little bit of work and experience to get all of this going and get it going correctly. So I've had a lot of failure on the way to finding out how to do this correctly. So if anyone's got any questions on solar pumps or Jean Pain compost heating, I would love to hear them in the comments below, because I like to hear everybody's feedback, ideas, and questions, so I can kind of further my knowledge and think outside the box sometimes. There's a lot of good ideas out there, you just got to drop them in the comments.